Okay, I will. So it's my pleasure to welcome you at the University of Warsaw seminar about Peru. This is like the first out of many Peruvian seminar, and we are really happy to have you with us. And it's my pleasure to say hello to two professors from the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru, Professor Oscar Vidarte and Sebastien Adins. I'm Dr. Joanna Gocłowska-Bolek from the Faculty of Political Science and International Studies of the University of Warsaw, and I'm a supervisor of the Students Association of Latin America and the Caribbean at the University of Warsaw, and this is their initiative. This is the students' initiative, and I'm really happy that the young people would like to listen about Peru, about a country that, especially now, is undergoing a political change and difficulties, and we would like to listen about what are your thoughts of the situation. But it's not my role to say anything at the beginning, so I'm just giving the floor to Dorota Burdyszek, who is going to lead the meeting. Dorota, please go on.
Okay, thank you so much. So good morning or good afternoon, according to the time zone. And I am very, very glad that, well, after, I will say in my case, two conferences with professors, finally, we are organizing this meeting. I am very, very happy about it. Some, let's say, infos before we will start, I mean, the most important part. So this meeting will be in English because we know that some students just don't know Spanish. And of course, I think it will be a very nice way if you will present your presentations, and then we'll go to the Q&A session. Of course, I have some questions, but I think that our audience also have some of them. So there are like two options. One for the audience is if you are shy and you prefer not to, ask like using your voice, you can just send it via chat. I will read it and it will be like this. Or you can raise your hand via Zoom. I mean, the hand is like when you have the reactions down on this strip. So it's when it comes to the organization things. And well, I think we'll do something like this. And I think that our meeting will take like 1 hour, 1 hour and 10 minutes, something like this, not to prolong it too much. And of course, I know that, well, I will give the floor to our guest professors, but I only want to mention that actually the topic for today should be the China and Peru relationship. But we know that according to some, let's say, issues, we need to focus also on some other factors because they are also important. And I will say that right now they are even more important or more interesting. So I will give a floor to you, professors. Please introduce yourself to our audience, and then you can start your presentation. But of course, feel free to comment the situation, the current situation. And of course, we can talk about it because I think that is interesting and is more up to you and up to our audience if we are mostly talk about this China and Peru or mostly about the situation. I mean, it's up to you. So it's everything from my side, and I give the virtual floor to you.
Okay, well, thank you. I can start maybe, Oscar, if it's okay for you? Okay, so my name is Sebastien Adins. Originally, I'm from Belgium, but living here for about 2 decades, already 20 years. First of all, it's a huge pleasure to be here. I have been in Poland several times. Last time it was with Oscar. It's there where we met with Dorota and the WIS Congress in 2024. So, of course, Peru is passing through some difficult times, although it's not the first time we are witnessing some political chaos, more than instability, I call it chaos. But of course, our main topic is about Peru, foreign policy of Peru, relations with the People's Republic of China, and of course, the whole era of strategic competition. So we divided a bit this presentation. Oscar will talk about the bilateral links between Peru and China. And I will give more like the context. I know that some of your students are not that familiar with Peru, even, I guess, with Latin America. So I will start with some basic ideas about what is strategic competition all about. Where is Latin America located in this whole issue? What is the importance of Latin America for both global players, the United States and China? And then, of course, I will talk a bit more about Peru's position in this strategic competition. I think, Dorota, you can correct me. We have 30 minutes each, or that's okay?
Yeah, I think, I mean, just please talk as long as you need, and then we can do a Q&A session. I think like 20 minutes or something like this will be perfect. And then, like, you know, each of you will have like 20 minutes or something like this.
Okay.
It will be okay.
Okay. But I have a presentation, so I will share it with you. If you can just give me your authorization.
Okay, I hope that maybe Professor Bolek,
Yeah.
I think you
Yeah.
should do it, or it works. Yeah, it works.
It's already done, so you can
Yeah,
do
okay.
it.
Yeah.
We can
Thank you
see
so
it.
much.
Thanks.
Okay. So just 2 minutes. What is strategic competition all about? I prefer the definition given by De Sico and Onia. They call it's a permanent, compulsory, comprehensive, and exclusive contest for supremacy in one or more regions, domains, or fields among those states considered to be the major players in the international system at a given time. I think, of course, in Poland, the same happens with my native country, Belgium. We talk a lot about Russia, about Ukraine, about Gaza, Israel, but when you look at it with some more distance, I think the big issue nowadays in international politics, it's this strategic competition among not Russia, but China and the United States. What is the importance of the United States? It's very important to mention it because, of course, we will see the reflection of it in Peru's ties with the US. Well, it's still the dominant military power, no? Even if you compare it with China. Military spending last year was about triple military spending of China. We won't talk even about the Russian Federation. It's still the main financial power when you look at the huge importance of the US dollar, of the SWIFT system. And even, I know it's a quite ambiguous concept, but soft power is still centered, right, around some Western powers such as the United States. What are the advantages the US has as a global player? Sometimes we don't mention it or enough. I would start with its geography. When you compare the US with China, the US just have two neighbors, one of them very easy. We are talking about Canada. The other one, well, it's not that easy, but still Mexico. China has more than 50 neighbors, so of course it's a huge, it's a far more complex location over there. You have the U.S. presence in the Indo-Pacific, in the southeastern part of Asia. Then, of course, there is the strength of its private sector. Again, when we look again at the main texts and interviews done by Joseph Nye, once he replied to a question, what are the basis of the U.S. soft power? Well, he gave the following response. It's all about HHMM, Hollywood, Harvard, Microsoft, McDonald's, and of course the four of them are basically centered around private companies. That's again a huge difference with the People's Republic of China. Talking about China, it's already the main industrial and trading power. It's a massive country, especially when you look at the population. One advantage, I think, especially when we talk from the so-called global south, is that China doesn't have a colonial, neither an imperial past. Apart from some of its neighbors, maybe in Thailand, in Vietnam or the Koreas, they will have another perspective on it. But if you compare it with European countries such as France, such as the UK, and of course the United States, again, there is a huge difference. And I will just finish this first part talking about the continuity, the policy continuity we have in China. Of course, we are not defending the Chinese part, the Communist Party in China, but at least we should recognize one of its advantages. They can really allow for a grand strategy to develop, not just in the following years, but even decades. When you look at some initiatives, such as the Belt and Road Initiative, Chinese experts, Chinese policymakers, they aren't just talking about what to do by 2026, 2030. No, they're already talking about 2050, 2070. And that, of course, we don't experience it in the US or in general in Western countries such as Europe. What is the importance of Latin America to the US? We are talking about Peru. It's part of Latin America. It's part of South America. And there you have it, our main concept, the Monroe Doctrine. It was announced, as you all know, maybe some of you, in 1823, so more than 2 centuries ago. But sometimes I feel that there is kind of some misunderstanding, some confusion about it. First of all, by 1823, the United States wasn't yet a big power, neither on the global stage, but neither in the whole of Latin America. It was but at the end of the 19th century with Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, not the other one, when the United States developed its fleet, when the Panama Canal, of course, was inaugurated in 1914. The first direct interventions by the United States in Latin America, well, again, we are talking about the 1910s, the 1920s, not at the beginning of the 19th century. The second idea, and again, it's very important to analyze links among China, the US, and Latin America. We should make a distinction between South America on the one hand, and Central America, the Caribbean, and of course Mexico on the other hand. When you look at, we will see the numbers. China's investment in Latin America, well, more than 85% is centered about or among South American economies, not Mexico, not Central American countries. Sometimes we are losing a bit of our minds some classics in geopolitics. One of the main authors, I really recommend it to read it again, some of its books, of its texts, 1930, 1940. And in fact, it was a Dutchman, Nicholas Pikeman, and he called about the American Mediterranean. Basically, he stated that within Latin America, just around the Caribbean, Mexico, Central America, and of course, Colombia and Venezuela, the United States really could behave like a hegemon, like the first power. Not in that way in the southern part of Latin America. He gave the impression, and again, I'm talking about somebody who developed its theories in the 30s and 40s of the 20th century, but he gave the impression that especially Brazil, Argentina, and maybe in a lesser scale, Chile and Peru could at least have some more autonomy towards the United States. And when we talk about autonomy in Latin America towards the United States, we are more or less talking about how to diversify international links. And it's there when some countries such as Germany, the Soviet Union, and nowadays the People's Republic of China are coming in. So again, it's important not to generalize. I understand that sometimes when I'm teaching at my alma mater in Ghent, they look at Latin America as one homogeneous region. In fact, we are talking about 20 quite different states with each of them its historical traditions. There is a paradox. Latin America, it's still considered, and even Donald Trump did recognize it some years ago. Latin America is still considered the US main sphere of influence. But when you look at what are the main regions in the last century for Washington, Latin America, it isn't one of the most important ones. Zbigniew Brzezinski, of course, he was originally from Poland, one of the main geopolitical authors in the US. he stated that it was Eurasia, the chessboard on which the struggle for global primacy is played. It isn't Latin America. So when you look at what are the main regions for the United States, of course, Western Europe, of course, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and eventually Asia Pacific. It isn't Latin America. I should say that for most of the time, from Washington, Latin America was taken as granted. They took it for granted that Latin America would be eternally part of its sphere of influence. And of course, there is a valid question. Was there ever a serious competitor to Washington within Latin America? Maybe in the 30s, there was some rapprochement towards the Nazis, Nazi Germany, from Argentina, from Brazil. But in comparison with the US presence, there was nothing to worry about. The same happened with the Soviet Union. Of course, in the Cold War, everybody talked about the danger of communism. But in fact, as you know, parity between the US and the Soviet Union was just in the military field. The Soviet Union, and the same happens today with Russia, they don't have the economic capacities to really engage among Latin American states. So nowadays, 2025, what are the main issues, links between Latin American states such as Peru and the United States? We can find them there. The economic presence, of course, FDI, so direct investments, trades. In the 80s and 90s, maybe debt. There was a whole issue about international debt in Latin America. And of course, some rather new topics, especially from the 70s and the 80s, drugs and migration. Maybe it isn't that known for you, but Peru is the second producer of cocaine in the world. More or less between 25 and 30% of trade, global trade in cocaine comes from Peru. It's just second after Colombia. So of course, that gives the relationship between Peru and US a quite particular dimension. What about democracy and human rights? Well, I always mention the famous side of Roosevelt talking about Somoza in Nicaragua. He said, it's a bastard, but it's our bastard. And I think the same applies even to these days when talking about the importance of democracy. Democracy is important in discourse, but in fact, when it deals about the real issues, I wouldn't say it's a very important topic, no? Apart from Donald Trump. Relations with China and Latin America, but maybe as a kind of recommendation, when you look at links between Peru and China, Latin America and China, it helps to see it more like a triangle. The United States, China, and Latin America. Because each of these three actors, they look at each other. When China tries to have some more investment in economies such as Peru, well, both Peru and China, they look upon the north. What will the United States think about it? So it's very important to stress how the United States comes in that apparently bilateral relation between Peru, or in general Latin American states, and the People's Republic of China. Well, what are the main topics? First of all, the one China policy. Peru was one of the first countries, apart from Cuba, the exception, always the exception in Latin America, and Chile, to recognize the People's Republic of China already in 1971. This is the famous votation of the Resolution 2758 in the General Assembly of the United Nations, in 1971. As you can see, to recognize the People's Republic of China as the only China was still an exception among Latin American countries. Only the green countries you can see here, Chile, Ecuador, Peru, Guyana, Mexico, and Cuba, were, let's say that way, enthusiastic towards that recognition. All the other countries still developed relations, official relations with Taiwan. Even, this is the map in the year 2000, all these countries in Central America, they still developed relations, the official diplomatic relations with Taiwan and not with the People's Republic of China. Of course, nowadays, just 3 Latin American states still have official relations with Taiwan, Paraguay, Guatemala, and Haiti, so maybe nowadays it's not that important. The huge topic, the most important topic, is about economics. And maybe there we should make a distinction between 3 areas of importance: trade, investments, and credits. These are the numbers. Look at the numbers. 1979, total trade between Latin America and China was worth $1.2 billion. In the year 2000, it arrived at more or less $10 billion. And then 2011, the boom, the effect of the booming trade relations, already $200 billion. This is the estimation for this year, 2025. Maybe we will already reach for the first time $550 billion. So really, the term booming, I think it's the only one who can really reflect the transformation of the trade links between the 2 parties. What about investment? These are the most recent numbers, estimations. We don't have any official numbers. Last year, China's investment in the whole of Latin America was worth around $203 billion. But again, we should distinguish between Central America, Mexico, the Caribbean, and South America. Last year, 73% of China's investment in Latin America arrived to just 4 countries. Brazil, of course, because of its economic dimension, it's quite normal to have Brazil in the first position. In the second position, Peru, and then Argentina and Chile. So 73% in just 4 countries. And then credits, fortunately for Peru, we don't have any debts with the People's Republic of China. In 2025, total debts given by the famous policy banks from China to Latin American countries was about $140 billion. Political links. Well, the political links, political cooperation, both on a bilateral level as on the rather multilateral levels, they developed quite recently. We are talking about the first decade of this century. And of course, we should see at the context in 2005 and 2008. There was like a strange combination of, first of all, the global war on terror. The United States had a kind of obsession with the Middle East, forgetting about the importance of Latin America. Second, the economic emergence of China. And third, the famous pink tide in Latin America. Do you remember the pink tide? It was all about the arrival of rather progressive, nationalist, leftist governments in Latin America, who it wasn't about make a rupture in their relations with the United States, but they were searching more autonomy. They tried to diversify their links, political links, economic links, and of course, it was there that China was one of the main candidates to strengthen relations. Security, is it already an important issue? No, not yet. There is just one country who bought some Chinese arms. It's Venezuela, basically because of the embargo imposed by the United States since more than 15 years. But when you look at training, when you look at military exercises, in general, dialogues among military between Latin America and China, it's still incipient. No? It centers more about humanitarian aid, disaster relief. There is some training in Chinese military academies, but again, it's not a priority, neither for Latin America, neither for the People's Republic of China. Peru. What about the links between Peru and the United States? Oscar will talk about Peru-China, so again, we should see it as a triangle. The relations between Peru and the United States have been, I should call it that way, ambiguous. On one hand, there were quite strong ties during the whole 20th century with the United States. with some exceptions. The exception of Velasco, of course, a military government between 1968 and 1975. And then again, a democratically elected government in the 80s, the one of Alan Garcia. But in general, there was quite an alignment between, I'm not saying an alliance, an alignment, strategic alignment between Peru and the United States. Of course, there were some tensions, even huge tensions. The economic presence of US companies that provoked some economic nationalism among some political parties in Peru. Of course, some search of autonomy, both with Velasco and with the mentioned government of Alan Garcia. Drugs, of course, but especially from the 90s, the relationship between Peru and the United States has been, in general, positive. First, because of the economic ties. Until the 90s, more than half of foreign investment in Peru came from the United States. It was with the economic opening of Peru in the 90s, that especially European companies came in. Movistar or Telefónica is a very known one. It's a Spanish company, some German companies. So it wasn't China, it was Europe, some companies from the European Union that arrived to Peru in the 90s at the beginning of this 21st century. But look at the numbers. Nowadays, in 2025, the stock of US investment in Peru was just $9 billion. It seems a lot, but you have to compare it with, of course, China investments. We have some new estimations for 2024 that state that the total investment stock of China is around 37 billion. So China, 37 billion, the United States, only $9 billion. The same happens with trade. This is the development between 1995 and last year, 2024. In blue, we can see the figures of the United States. In red, China. Imports, exports, the same for China. In the 90s, total exports from Peru to China, they were about 5% of total exports. Last year, it was near 35% of the Peruvian total exports. The same with the United States. Total exports from Peru to the United States in the 90s, almost 35. Last year, it was less than 15%. So it's like a mirror, okay? Two main economies, but of course, we see the increasing importance made by or shown by the People's Republic of China. When I talk about strategic alignment between the United States and Peru, we are talking about military ties, and we are talking about a rather, I call it that way, political convergence. Peru was, in the last 2 decades, the fourth receiver of military assistance from the United States, followed by, after Mexico, of course, Colombia, and Haiti. So that says a lot. When you look at training, last year, there were almost 150 officials from the Peruvian military that were sent to military academies in the United States. What about China? 7 officials. Political convergence. Of course, we are talking about the era before Donald Trump. The era when still the United States was defending human rights, was defending democracy. But even there, when you look at the votings of Peru in the General Assembly of the United Nations, we can look at issues such as Ukraine, such as Kosovo, even Iran. There is a very close alignment with the United States and, of course, some Western European countries. Peru was member, of course, non-permanent of the Security Council between 2018 and 2019. We look at the numbers of voting convergence. Well, with the United States, it was about 75%. With China, it was just 25%. So that says enough. And then, of course, maybe it's a rather subjective perspective, but the international identity of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it's clearly pro-Western. when you ask to a Peruvian diplomat, would you rather go to Beijing or to Budapest? I'm really sure he will answer Budapest. With all my due respect, Budapest is one of my favorite cities in Europe, of course, after Warsaw. But when you compare the importance of Hungary with China, I think you understand the message. It has a lot to do with training. The training still based on the importance of the liberal international order, around free trade, around the importance of the United States and the EU in the world. But of course, there is also the social profile of some diplomats. It is changing, that's the good news. But traditionally speaking, who were diplomats in Peru? They were male, white, and they came from Lima. They were lawyers. So of course, that explains a lot. More or less 35 to 40% of Peruvian population, they are indigenous, but this indigenous element is basically absent in Peru's foreign policy. So I think there is another explanation behind the alignment with the United States. Maybe some 5 minutes more. Lima's anxiety in a context of strategic competition. I prefer to call it that way, geopolitical anxiety. And of course, Peru isn't the only case in the world. I think the most important issue, maybe apart from Europe, in foreign ministries, in Africa, in Asia, is what to do in this difficult times of strategic competition. If we have China as the main economic partner, but at the same time, the United States are still our political partner, our security partner, what to do? Some authors in IR, especially in the southeastern part of Asia, they speak a lot about hedging. You know, hedging. It's like in the banking, it's like in finance. It's better not to invest all of the actions of one company in just one company. It's better to diversify the risks. Well, the same happens in IR, the same happens in foreign policy. I will try not to repeat the topics that will be, I think, analyzed by Oscar, but maybe mention some particularities that explain the relation between Peru and China. First of all, migration. The first Chinese migrants to Peru, they already arrived in 1849. Of course, these are estimations, but some sociologues, some anthropological studies, they say that between 5 and 10% of Peruvians, they have some ascendancy of China. When you come to Peru, and of course, I recommend it, you will see the enormous amount of chifas, even in the smallest village in the Andes, in the Amazon, you will see a chifa. What is a chifa? It's a Chinese restaurant. Of course, like all Chinese restaurants in the world, it's a blend between Chinese gastronomic traditions and Peruvian ingredients. So, of course, this isn't a detail. Even from the official discourse of Xi Jinping arrived to Peru last year to participate in the last APEC meeting. And every time there is a reference to migration, to the cultural links between China and Peru. You can see the other picture, it's Chinese New Year in El Barrio Chino. It's the Chinese neighborhood of Lima. It's the second biggest Chinatown in the whole of America, apart from San Francisco. And if you arrive to Lima, of course, you will see this one. This is the Pacific Ocean. Lima is the only capital in Latin America to have access to be located on the shores of the Pacific Ocean. And there is that tiny monument. It was inaugurated, I think, maybe 3 or 4 years ago by the Chinese embassies. So again, we aren't just talking about trade and investment. There is that rather human link between Peru and China. Second, very important, Peru is the most open economy in the Americas. When you look at figures of the World Trade Organization, in average, tariffs of Peru are about 2.4%. It's less than Chile, less than Argentina, of course, less than open economies such as Colombia or Mexico. So of course, that explains partly the enormous presence of Chinese companies. Politically speaking, I already told you that it's a chaos. Peru have had 8 presidents. Maybe there will be a 9th after today. Oscar may explain it a bit more. But politically speaking, it's a chaos. In terms of the economy, it's one of the most stable countries in Latin America. The sol, the national currency, it's more stable than the currency in Brazil, than the peso of Chile, and even the peso of Mexico. So that explains why some Chinese companies, they see Peru not just as a country with enormous natural resources, as a rather strategic located country on the shores of the Pacific, but they also consider the economic model of openness, even when you compare it to Chile, because in Peru, we always make that comparison with Chile. Peru and Chile, both countries, they are responsible for more than half of global exports of copper. But the huge difference between Chile and Peru is that the Chilean state still dominates in the production of copper. That doesn't apply in Peru. 95% of total copper production in Peru is in foreign hands. So the constitution of Peru allows for the arrival of foreign companies already since the 90s. And of course, some of them increasingly are from Chinese origins. For now, and I will finish with this one, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, China is seen as a trading partner and an investment partner. It's not a political partner yet, and of course, military or security issues, it's almost a taboo talking about it. It's still the United States, okay? Maybe you know it, the People's Republic of China, of course, since more than a decade, has its famous Belt and Road Initiative. But more recently, Xi Jinping inaugurated the Global Development Initiative, the Global Security Initiative, and the Global Civilization Initiative. I think it says a lot that Peru is just part of the Global Development Initiative and not of the other 2 ones. Why? Because of that whole idea. China is an economic partner, but when it treats about security, about politics, Peru still sees itself as part of the global West, and especially as a partner of the United States. But of course, things in life aren't that simple. It's very easy to say, no, China is building a huge port, but a port, it's investment, and investment, it's all about economics. There is a clear tendency, especially in the last couple of years, the last 5 years, from the United States to securitize Chinese investments in Latin America. Just to give you one side, former General Laura Richardson talked about the megaport city of Chancay. It's a port with 60% of China's investments. And she says the following: it could be used as a dual-use facility. It's a deep water port. This is a playbook that we have seen play out in other places, not just in Latin America. So basically she was stating, okay, for now, Chancay, it's just a port. It's just a port. It's just about a trade, about an investment of China in Peru. But maybe in 15 years, maybe in 20 years, the situation will be different. If you know what happened to Hambantota port in Sri Lanka or Gwadar in Pakistan, well, these ports, they began as just economic infrastructure. I'm not defending that idea, but talking about anxiety, of course, Peru struggles with that whole issue. Peru is still a developing country. There are enormous needs in infrastructure, in construction. And let's be honest, apart from China, there isn't really another economy with the economic capacities to invest in Peru. We see quite the opposite. There are some US companies, some European countries that are already withdrawing from Peru. So it's easy. Sometimes they invite me at the EU representation here in Lima, and one of the basic questions is, why is there that obsession about China among Peruvian policymakers? My answer is, well, basically because your companies, European companies and US companies, they are withdrawing. So it's not about a geopolitical association. Peru sees China as an economic opportunity, and maybe that explains why the official policy, the official foreign policy of Peru nowadays, it's called active neutrality. It's quite difficult because, again, politically speaking, Peru is part of the West. But with the increasing economic presence of China's companies, maybe they want to do a bit the same as Southeast Asian countries and basically hedge in an era of strategic competition. I had a lot more to share with you, but maybe we can answer some questions after the presentation of Oscar. Bardzo dziękuję.
Bardzo dziękujemy. Thank you so much. And now I give this virtual floor to the Professor Vidarte. I think that it should, yeah, it works. Okay, so I think it's, yeah, you will be presenting something or not, because I'm trying to give you the access to.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, it works. Okay.
Okay, perfect. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I had the pleasure of meeting Joanne and Dorota some time ago. And also I have the pleasure to visiting Warsaw with Sebastien my first time last year. Okay, I expect it was not the last one, but thank you very much for this invitation. We are very glad with Sebastien about talking Peru and Latin America. I have traveled a lot in the world, and not too many people know about. When you talk about Latin America, you always talk about the big countries of Latin America, like Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, and sometimes we lost to know that there are more countries, okay, medium countries like Colombia, Peru, Chile, okay, even Venezuela, no, and little one also. But we understand Latin America looking only these big countries, no, and I think we are very different between us. Well. The relationship between Peru and China, foundation of the bilateral agenda is the name of my presentation, okay? But when we have to talk, sorry, okay, that's great. When we talk about the relation between Peru and China, first we have to talk about the relation between China and Latin America. Sebastien have told very interesting about this triangle, China, Latin America, and Peru, no? Is when China built their foreign policy with Peru, they first understand, or they first build their relation with Latin America, because Peru is a medium country in the region and a little country in the world, and they first build their policy with our region and then Peru. Okay, that's the reason that it's very important to know how was the evolution, or how is the evolution of the relation with China and Latin America, and then understand how is the relation between China and Peru. Only one thing is very ironic, okay, because we talk a lot of Latin America, but Latin America is very, very different inside, okay? And this is that first thing that I even say everywhere, no? All the people told, what's Latin America, or something about Latin America, and really we're very different. It's very different. The Atlantic from the Pacific is very different. South America from Central America, and Mexico. All the foreign policy of Mexico is guided by the United States. They only 80% of their foreign policies United States. That not happen in South America. So when we talk about Latin America, really we're talking about a lot of different things. Okay, the Andean region is different than the Atlantic, is different than the Caribbean. So when we talk about Latin America, we talk about a lot of things, really. Okay, so how is the relation between China and Latin America? When since the beginning, okay, of the Republic of China, okay, that the relation between China and Latin America was built by the promotion of the no, the foreign policy of China, the most important of the foreign policy of China was the promotion of ideology and cultural ties. No, they want to export their revolutionary model to our countries. No, they think that our countries were in the same condition that China before the revolution. No, we're countries we were countries with a lot of Western influence, the intervention of the Western countries like United Nations, like United States, were permanently. So they want to export the revolutionary model, no? But this changed in the 70s. I think that the recap between China and Russia and their approach with United States is very important, because they understand that they have to build other kind of relations with the countries. They want to be recognized, okay, in the world. You know that even until 70s, the China, who was in the UN, in the United Nations, is not the communist China, is Taiwan. So they want to be recognized, and they change their politics that generate a lot of preoccupation, a lot of upset in our region. No? So they abandon the emphasis of national liberation, okay, and they try to build other kind of relations. So our countries open to this new foreign policy, and that's not the reason that explains why since the 70s our countries begin to recognize China. No? I think the first country that recognized China in Latin America was Chile, but the second one was Peru in 1971. In the 80s, things still changing, okay? The process of economic modernization that China began in that decade generate a lot of expectative in the Latin American countries, okay, about the possibility of increased trade, for example, okay. But the changes the situation, the changes that we saw at the end of that decade generate some also upset about what can happen in China. You remember what happened in the Tiananmen Square in 1989. So okay, so all Latin America was looking at the changes about what's happening in the communist countries and what's happening also in China, and the maintain of the communist regime in China generate upset in our countries. But in the 90s, these not good perceptions change. The growth of China was really important since 1994, 95. You know that the growth of China superated 15% per year. So this generate again expectative in our region. Okay, so this is the foundation of the relation that we built in the 21st century. In the 21st century, I think that we can resume in three big things. Okay, the relation between Latin America and China can resume in three big topics. First of all, I think the foundation of the Chinese foreign policy with our countries have three topics. One, resources, okay, getting resources. Two, energy. Three, investments. And four, the situation of Taiwan, also important in the Chinese foreign policy. Second, I think that Latin America is important for China, but not so important in our countries. It's very common to say that Latin America is so important for China, no? Because you can see the increasing presence of China in our countries, no, everywhere. But that's not true. Okay, if you compare the importance of Central Asia, for example, in comparison with Latin America, I'm sure that Central Asia is more important. So Latin America is the last wheel of the car, no? This is a Latin American phrase. Okay, we are the last wheel of the car. That's obviously, and for example, the incorporation of Latin America into the Belt Road Initiative. Okay, we were the last region, okay, incorporated in this project. Okay, that can show how important is Latin America for China. No, I'm not saying that we are not important, okay, but we can talk about the relative importance of Latin America for the Chinese foreign policy, okay. And finally, third, I'm sure that the type of relation that China and Latin America is building, okay, is a North-South relationship. No, at the beginning we thought that we can build a South-South relationship, okay. The discourse of the Chinese authorities said that a South-South relationship, but it's obviously now, okay, that is it's a typical North-South relationship. Okay, the influence of China and on the economic of American countries are very big. Okay, they export industrial products to our countries, and we export commodities to China. So this is the basis of any North-South relationship. Well, and what happened with Peru? Okay, what's happened with Peru? Okay, I'm going to divide the relation with Peru into frameworks, no? The political framework and the economic framework. Okay, first in political terms, what happens? No, first of all, we have to say that there has been, okay, there have increased the high level contacts between China and Peru. No, before the 90s, it was very difficult to find high level contacts between our countries. Okay, but since 90s, mostly since 21st century, it's very common to see a Peruvian president in China. I thought that all our last Peruvian president have visited sometime China. Okay, and also Xi Jinping, for example, has visited twice. No, he has made 2 official visits to Peru in 2016 and 2024. Okay, both in APEC meetings. Okay, so it's very common to see this kind of interaction, high level interaction. Okay, between our countries. Now it's very common. Okay, this picture is from the first visit of Xi Jinping to Peru. Okay, in the Peruvian Congress, I think. And second, also our bilateral relation is getting deeper. No, okay, there is a strengthened bilateral relations. Okay, since the recognition in 1971, we built a lot of consultation mechanisms. Okay, I want to tell some of these. First, the multidimensional partnership 2004, strategic partnership 2008, multidimensional strategic partnership 2013. Okay, you know, these mechanisms are mechanisms that China use, okay, to build their relation with a lot of countries in the world. Okay, till some years ago, the multidimensional strategic partnership is the biggest one. Okay, I think this one in Latin America only have 6 countries. Okay, more or less. Venezuela, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Peru. I don't know. I'm not sure if Mexico, but 6 or 7 countries only of all Latin America have this level of relation with China. Okay. But at 2019, Peru joins the Belt and Road Initiative. Okay, I think this is very important for China. I'm not sure. Maybe Sebastien can talk more about this. I'm not sure that the real impact of the Belt and Road Initiative in our countries. Okay, I'm not sure about that, but in political terms, it was very important. Okay, Peru joins this project in 2019, and 1 year later, in 2020, began the building or the construction of the Shanghai port. Okay, I'm going to talk a little more about Shanghai port in some minutes. Sebastien has talked a little about Shanghai port some minutes ago. What's the next step? What we can expect? What can come now? Okay, in political terms between Peru and China, some people talk about something that China is building with some countries. I have read that with Brazil is negotiating something called Comprehensive Strategic Cooperation Partnership, a new level of the relation. With Peru, there are not They're nothing new, okay, but maybe can be the future of our relation. The real thing is that Peru has economic alignment and strategic political economic alignment with China, okay. Now, what else? We can think our relation not only in bilateral terms, we also can think in multilateral terms, okay? And Peru participating in different spheres, okay, different spaces, okay? That multilateral space, Latin American multilateral spaces that are building relations with China, like CELAC. Remember that 2 months ago, there was the CELAC China meeting in Beijing, okay, 2 months ago. Also, maybe you know about the Pacific Alliance. Peru's member joined with China, Colombia, and Mexico of the Pacific Alliance. China has shown a lot of interest about the Pacific Alliance. And also the Andean community. Peru is member of the Andean community, and I think 1 week ago, China was declared observer country of the Andean community. Okay, so there are also spaces that relation between China and Peru can build. No, and last one, the military presence. I think that in these terms, Sebastien has talked that the security is not part of the agenda between China and Latin America, and also in Peru. There is a limited military presence, okay? There are also a relative increase in military cooperation, okay, but very relative, okay? Peru still buy arms to Western country, principally, okay? To Western country and not to China. So the cooperation with China is very relative still now. We don't know what is going to what can happen in the future, but still now in military issues, there are very military relative presence, okay? And what happened in economic terms, okay? First of all, we have to say that Peru recognized China as a market economy in 2004, okay? And this generated the possibility to negotiate and to sign FTA, a free trade agreement between our countries in 2009, okay? This is very important. You have seen you have seen the information that Sebastien told us about the evolution of the trade between our countries, and since 2010 first, and then 2012, that China became our main trading partner. Okay, since 2010, the United States was our main trading partner, but this changed in 2012 till now. Okay, now the difference is bigger. 35% of our trade goes to China. Okay, and only 16% of our trade goes to the United States. So the difference is getting bigger. Okay, China is our main trading partner. Okay, there are 3 things. There are three kind of products that we export to China: minerals, fish meal, and fruits mostly. Okay, but minerals are the 80 or 90% of all our importation. Okay, to China. Okay, that's the reason I said in the PowerPoint the importance of the primary extractive activities. Okay, 80 or 90%, 90% is minerals, and mostly copper. Okay. What else? Not only we have to talk about trade, we also have to talk about investments, okay? And there is also an important, okay, when we talk about the main Chinese investments in Peru, we are talking about natural resources, no? Okay, what we talk about, what we told strategic activities, okay? I think the most important investments of China in Peru is on natural resources, okay? And it's not strange that the first major investment in Latin America was in Peru. Okay, China bought Shogun, is a Chinese enterprise, bought iron national public enterprise. Okay, called China-Peru in the 90s. It was the first major Chinese investment in a region. Okay, not only in Peru. Okay. The Chinese investment, I think, has three destinations. Okay, mining. Okay, there are a lot of Chinese presence in mining, even in different mines: Marcona, Toromocho, Las Bambas, Rio Blanco, Galeno, etc. Oil. Okay, they have bought all the Brazilian presence. Petrobras, this big Brazilian oil company, they bought all the Brazilian presence in Peru. Electricity is very interesting because they were, for example, Lima has two very big, the companies of electricity, Luz del Sur and Enel, and both are now Chinese. Okay, so China produced the 100% of the electricity that was consumed in Lima, in the capital, and this electricity is more or less than the 30% of the electricity of all the country. Okay, and they are now in hands of Chinese enterprises. Okay, also we have to talk about hydroelectric plants. Okay, power plants. Okay, China have investment in hydroelectric power plants in different parts of Peru. Okay, mostly in the south of Peru. And finally, infrastructure. Okay, in this topic, obviously the most important project is till now the port of Shanghai. Okay, they have the first part, the first part of this investment. China has invested more or less than 1,500 millions of dollars. Okay, and they expect that in the next 4 years they're going to invest more or less than $3,000 million more. Okay, and now China is looking at the possibility to invest in other important in infrastructure, in other kind of infrastructure like railways. We're talking about building a lot of railways in different parts of Peru. So China is very interested in doing that. So Sinte Sambor is a very famous academic. Okay, Peruvian academic in economic issues between Peru and China, and she has written that the Chinese investment in Peru, there is an evolution, okay, from extraction at the beginning since the 90s to construction in the last 3 or 4 years, So this is a very interesting thing. How is the evolution of the Chinese investment in the last years in Peru? And we have to talk finally, when we talk about economy, we have to talk about also finance. Okay, you know that China is the Chinese credits were very important in Latin America in the last years. Some countries like Argentina, Venezuela, and Ecuador receive a lot of Chinese credits. Okay, in the last decade, it was a very difficult economic decade, but for our region, some countries have used this credit to maintain the economy. Okay, that's not the case of Peru. Peru didn't ask for this credit. Okay, that's not that this doesn't mean that we are not contacts with the different forms of finance of China from China. No, I think we have received some Chinese private credits. Okay, with some not too much. Okay, and in 2022 we entered to the Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank. Okay, that that can replace in the future the FMA. Okay, the Monetary International Fund. Okay, and I think that Peru participate in these spaces, but it's not the main thing. They're not so important for our interest in the relation with China. Okay, we also can talk about technology. I think that this is a topic that there are a lot of new research about this. How is the competition between United States and China in technological terms? Okay, I think that China is a key partner of Peru. Okay, it's a very key partner in political and economic terms. Okay, but not in other topics like military or social terms. Okay, they are increasing the presence of China in some topics that Western countries had more influence, like cooperation. Okay, I remember now, for example, the mask politics of China during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, we expect more cooperation with the United States, but we receive at the beginning, in the first year, more cooperation from China. Okay, even the vaccines that we received at first were Chinese. Okay, then we received Western vaccines, but at the beginning only Chinese vaccines. So I think that the relation with China is getting closer. Okay, and we have a lot of attention about what is happening in the competition between Chinese and United States. No, for us, the United States is very important in everything. China also, and we don't know what's going to happen if this competition getting deeper. No, okay, and how is going to be the position of Peru. No? Okay, we talk about active neutrality, or other people talk about hedging, but I think it's going to be very difficult because some countries, like for example Chile or Peru, we depend too much in these two countries. No, that is going to be very difficult to take position. Okay, to take position between one or the other country. Okay. So, but I think this is going to be debated. We're going to have in the next years. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I hope you can learn a little more about the basis, the foundation of the relation between Peru and China. I'm going to be glad to receive any kind of question. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation and presentation. I think that right now we can go to the Q&A session, and I already see that we have a question on chat. I will read it because, well, maybe some people don't know how to see it. So I will read it, and I think that maybe you can also read it like you wish. And right now, if somebody will want to ask a question, please write it via chat or raise your virtual hand. It is in the section reactions. Okay, so I read the question. For the US, Latin America is apparent sphere of influence, but on the other hand, would you agree that Europe, the European Union, has a more natural link to Latin America due to its historical and cultural ties? Could this be a base for a closer cooperation between the EU and Latin America, a bit in opposition to the hegemonic US? Or the 200 years of the US dominance have already taken its toll, and Latin America is now permanently more American than European, and that Europe is in a losing position in the face of Chinese competition? Okay, and who wishes to answer to this question?
I can begin if you agree, Oscar. Well, in fact, I was reading the comment and the question, and I was thinking about Charles de Gaulle. He once in the 60s made a trip, 3 weeks, among Latin American countries, trying to convince Latin American leaders that the similarities among France and Latin America were far huger than with Latin America and the United States. He even talked about la latinité, that cultural, political relationship between Latin America and Europe. And in fact, I agree. There are historic links, there is culture. We talk here, especially Spanish and Portuguese, of course, that makes that, naturally speaking, Europe is still seen as an important region, especially now, even in times of Donald Trump, there are quite some political coincidences. It's true, we live in a very unstable political system, but even then, we shouldn't be that pessimistic in the sense that apart from Europe, it's Latin America, the region with the most democratic countries when you compare it with the Middle East, with Africa, with even the Asian continent. But then I also agree with the second part of the question. Economic links, of course, they are still important. When you look at investment in countries such as Peru, we can still find some British, some Spanish, some German, French investments. But in fact, this is a declining topic, especially because, yeah, we should talk in relative terms. Absolute terms, okay, there is, let's say it that way, a kind of stagnation of trade, of investment with the European Union. But in relative terms, the percentage of total exports that goes to the European Union, it's declining. You know? Once, maybe 2 decades or 3 decades ago, we were talking about 30% of total exports of South American countries. Now it's less than 20%. And then, of course, we should consider at least the image of the European Union. I remember when I first arrived to Peru more than 2 decades ago, really, there was a lot of talk about the European Union, about the at that time, new currency of the euro. Some authors, they even stated that maybe the European Union with more political integration, with more strategic autonomy vis-a-vis the United States, well, that European bloc could well become the new superpower in the 21st century. But nowadays, I'm not saying that image of the European Union is bad, but there are a lot of critics. Yeah. Some say the European Union has a rather paternalistic approach toward Latin America. Of course, there are the double standards when you compare the official policy towards Ukraine and then towards topics such as Gaza and Israel. And of course, there is the part of interest. Since the foundation of the summits between CELAC, these are 33 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean and the European Union. There have been only 4 summits. There were 8 years between 2015 and 2023, I'm not wrong, without any summits. And then, of course, there was a summit in 2023. And in some newspapers, maybe Oscar, he can coincident, but in some papers they said, okay, now that Europeans need us, they need us for resources, lithium, for instance, and that they need some support in the whole issue of how to apply sanctions towards Russia. Now there is a summit. So again, there is kind of ambiguity with Europe. There are these historical links. There is still some political, some economic cooperation, but one, it's a presence in decline, and second, maybe the European Union should take care more about its image, not take it for granted as the United States did once, that Latin America, because of its historic links, will always be a partner or even an ally in multilateral spaces or even in the economic field. That would be my reply.
Yes, that is true that we have a lot of historical and cultural ties, okay, that we can use to improve our relations, and that's true. But these kind of questions, I have anytime that I travel to Europe to international congress, I receive this kind of questions. No, okay, what can happen with the meeting, with the relation between Peru, Latin America and Europe? No, what is happening? What can happen? How we can improve that? These kind of questions are typical questions. Okay, when we talk about the relation between our regions, but my answer is the same. Okay, it's the same. I think this relation depends more in Europe than in Latin America. Okay, we are open to receive cooperation, to build relations, to do a lot of things with Europe, but it depends more of Europe and the priorities that Europe have with our region, or their priorities in foreign policy. No, the example that have said Sebastien is true. No, that the last CELAC, this Latin American Caribbean Community with European Union, was in 2023. The next one is going to be in November in Colombia. Okay, now this year. But how many years have passed from the last meeting? Okay, I think 5 or 6 years, okay? And we are very interested with having relation, with building relation with Europe. But if Europe doesn't have the same interest, but it can be very different, very difficult. No, for example, there is very common to say why we can permit that two Chinese enterprises produce all the energy of one city, of the capital like Lima. But something that not all people know is that these two enterprises both, okay, both the enterprise from two Western enterprises, okay. These Chinese bought from two Western enterprises, one from US and the other one from Italy also. So there were two Western enterprises who sold these enterprises to Chinese enterprises, okay. So the question is why they're not interested in Western enterprises, in Western corporations or European corporations in this kind of issues. Well, if you don't want to invest in this kind of issues, well, China can do it, okay? And we need this kind of investment. So I think that the question is more in hands of the answer is more in hands of Europe than in Latin America.
Can I just add maybe just one message, maybe to amplify a bit the debate, because a lot of people, Oscar just mentioned, and I think it's crucial to understand Chinese presence. In electricity, in fact, the two companies were Italian and the other one from the US. And I think that shows the geo-economic power of China. It's not just about having economic capacities. It's about that whole idea of a kind of symbiosis between the Communist Party, the Chinese state, and enterprises. Just to give you one idea of all the Chinese investments realized in Peru, more than 90% comes from state-owned enterprises. So exaggerating a little bit, when after the summit of APEC in November last year, Xi Jinping would have had a meeting with representatives of the state-owned enterprises. Of course, we are talking about a hypothetical meeting, and he would have called, okay, I would like that you guys, you go to invest in Peru, maybe in infrastructure, maybe in drain systems, and some winery projects. Well, probably these companies will have investment in China. So a lot of Chinese investments, not just in Peru, it's passing in the whole world. They respond to strategic considerations. And that's the thing we don't have in Europe, neither in the United States. Even with Donald Trump, Trump can't say just to, I don't know, a director of Apple, of Microsoft, please, you should invest in Peru. That won't happen. These are private companies. And basically, what is a private company searching for in Peru, in Latin America? It's just about economic interests. They don't have that geopolitical viewpoint that I think makes the difference with Chinese investment, I think.
And one example of this symbiosis between Communist Party and Chinese corporations is the port of Shanghai. Okay. Also, the port of Shanghai is a Chinese investment, and it's a Chinese port, okay? And port of Shanghai, if you know, I think is going to be in some years the most important port in all the Pacific Sur, okay? This port have all the conditions because it's the only port in all the Pacific Sur that can have their direct connections, because this big how do you say, this big barcos, how do you say barcos? I forgot. This big
boat.
These boats, it's very easy, okay? These big boats is the only port in all the Pacific Sud that can receive these big boats that can make a direct connection between South America and China, no? And I think it can be the most important in the future is a Chinese port, no? If you read some academics in the United States, their preoccupation is in how this port can also have military objective, okay? And they're very upset about how China can manage, okay, the port dynamic of the Pacific Sur, no, and not only because economic issue, also thinking in military situations, no. So we are not looking. We are not looking in that way the investment than Western countries made, no.
Okay, so I think it was a answer and comment, and we have comment to comment, but I think that we will skip it for a moment. You can read it via chat, because I know that there are some people who also want to ask a question. And as I mentioned, I do not want to prolong our seminar too long. So yeah, so let's go to the question of Barbara Midziak.
Yes, hello. First of all, thank you so much for the presentations. They were so interesting. I have a question more on the domestic issues, I would say. Well, in Peru, we have this very difficult history with Sendero Luminoso, no, the Shining Path. And it was a Maoist party. Abimael Guzman was trained in Peking, in Beijing. So my question is, does this association exist at all in the mind of Peruvians, that Shining Path was Chinese in some way, you know, ideologically speaking, and now we have more Chinese investments? Are Peruvians, how is the society reacting to Peruvian investments, to Peru entering? Of course, we have huge migration from China, so we have also this other perspective, as you, Sebastian, have mentioned. But yes, I was curious whether this association exists at all in the minds of Peruvians. Thank you so much.
In fact, I had the same question some years ago, because you're right. Yeah, the most successful Maoist guerrilla terrorist movement in Latin America was Sendero Luminoso here in Peru. But of course, it was Maoist, but it began its armed struggle in 1980. So Mao was already gone. And maybe for those not that familiar with the armed conflict, everything began in 1980, not just in Ayacucho, in some rural areas, but also in some streets in downtown Lima. Members of Sendero Luminoso, they literally hang dogs, of course, dead dogs, with the message, Deng Xiaoping, traitor. And of course, a lot of Peruvian people, they said, Deng Xiaoping, who is he? He was just leader in China for 2 years. But maybe that explains why it isn't that much of an issue. Even the political right in Peru, they see China as a kind of pragmatic economic powerhouse. They understand that in most cases, Maoism, it's more like an ideological ritual than really a practice, and as in the times of the Cultural Revolution in the 60s and the 70s. So yeah, you're right. When I witnessed the arrival of Xi Jinping with all the little flags of China, but of course, it was the same flag that Sendero Luminoso in the 80s was using during its armed struggle. But no, apparently it's not an issue.
Barbara, hi. It's very glad to see you again. No, it's not part of the debate. It's a very interesting question, but it's not part of the debate. China have changed a lot their foreign policy with Latin America, so they don't use this national liberation, okay, issues. No, there's not part of the debate. And even if you see some surveys, okay, you can see that the perception of China in Peru is getting better. There are some things that generate preoccupation, like I know the labor, no, the labor in the Chinese corporations, no, okay, or the respect of the environment, okay. They are not so trust. The people don't trust too much in this kind of issue with the Chinese corporation. But in the surveys that we have, we can read that the perception of China is getting better in the Peruvian society. Okay, but one thing is very. I want to see one more thing that is very ironic, that is very common in the political framework. Okay, in the Peruvian framework, to try to say the other part, communist. No, there is the right. Okay, the political right in Peru use a lot to question the other part and use the adjective of communist, no? And they're very, for me, it's very ironic because a communist party is our main trade partner, okay, in the world, no? But we use the term communist like a way to question our opposite, no? And communist, you're communist. No, I'm not communist. Yes, you're communist. But the communists are our main trade partner. So what you're talking, okay? The communists are our friends. So no, but well, nothing else. Thank you very much, Barbara.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for answering to the question. I think that we still have like 2 or 3 minutes for the last question, and it's on the chat. I will read it. What about Japanese descendants? Do they feel some sort of community with the Chinese? I mean, in Asian terms, or do they see them as completely different? Okay, so right now we are switching to the Japan.
In fact, it's strange because Peruvians in general, they take Chinese people, Japanese people, and Korean people as more or less the same. Of course, the most famous president in Peru at the last decade of the 20th century was Alberto Fujimori, and he himself, he called himself Chino, so Chinese, but he was from Japanese origins. But that's the Peruvian perspective. I think the Japanese community, and Oscar, he's more familiar with the Japanese community, but it's smaller, and I would call it more like low profile if you compare it with Chinese presence. We don't have that lot of restaurants, for instance, or celebrations, or even cultural associations. There are dozens of Tucson cultural associations. The Tucsons, they are Peruvians, but of some Chinese ascendancy. I would say that these are completely different worlds, and in general, I wouldn't say that both will profile themselves as being Asian. And apart from that, of course, when we talk about Chinese migrants in Peru, there is a huge difference between Peruvian people, Tucson, whose grandparents or even other relatives in the 19th century already arrived to Peru, and people who arrived in, I don't know, 2010, 2015. So it's not that correct to talk about a Chinese community. There are a lot of differences among all these generations.
Even I thought that the Chinese migration is more homogeneous, no? Because the Japanese migration came mostly from Okinawa, okay?
Yeah.
Mostly from, but and the Chinese migration came from different parts of China. So you can see a lot of difference between in the Chinese migration in Peru, no? Okay, and I think there are not problems between the Japanese and Chinese migration. You know that we have the Chinese community is bigger than the Japanese community, but Peru has the second biggest Japanese community in Latin America, okay, after Brazil, okay. So no, there are not few, there are a lot, okay, but there are not too many problems. My son studies in a Japanese school here in Peru, and there's not problems, and they, like a Chinese, they try to mix their culture with Peruvian cultures, no? And we talk about Tucson, the descendants of the Chinese in Peru, and we talk about Nikkeis, the descendants of the Japanese in Peru, okay?
Yeah, okay, so I think that this was the answer to our question. Unfortunately, I think that we need to end our seminar because, well, it was pretty long. And, well, I just want to say thank you to you. I mean, it was, like, amazing. And I hope that maybe, I think I will ask that maybe in 1 month or something like this, we can organize a seminar on the topic of, impeachment, because we will know who will be who will be in the government, and if the current president will be still the president, because
the problem is which impeachment, because we have like 4 impeachment in the last 5 years. So which impeachment?
Yeah, I mean the last one.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean the last one. The situation from last week. I think it will be very great if you want to say something to us about it, because, well, it's very interesting. And actually, the case of Peru in this term is like different story, like always. So yeah, so one more time, I am very, very thankful that you decided to, well, be our guest today. And I am very happy that finally we organized this seminar, and I hope it will be something like maybe a tradition. Okay, so from my side is everything. And I think that Professor Gusłowska-Bolek could stop the recording, not to...
Yes, so many thanks from my side, and we are hungry of the knowledge about Peru, and now we are like we will ask you for more seminars for sure, because it was like very involving, and really we are happy to get to know your perspective. So thanks a lot. And see you, I hope, next month. Thanks.
Well,
It has been a pleasure.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Professor
Thank you for the
Gosłowska,
invitation.
and thank you, Dorota, for the perfect organization.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
Dorota.